I think Roger may not have been the first person since the Void Century to make it to Laugh Tale. What? Yeah, I said what I said. I'm sorry to interrupt your normally scheduled programming, but this discovery is quite literally hot off the presses. I think there was a legend that we literally have to deep dive to even see that might give us more clues to this mysterious final treasure, the One Piece. See, the one thing I was kind of thinking about was that it doesn't really make sense that in the 800 years between the Void Century and the current timeline, there was only one or two people close to the One Piece, those two people being Roger and possibly Rox. It would make sense to me that there were others that studied the poneglyphs also. And guess what? I think there's actually proof that they weren't the first. And I'll give you some time to think about who I'm going to be talking about. So if you're new to my channel, the way I view the world is by making connections. So let me connect you to my vision, the Par Vision. Alright, I'm going to give you a little extra time. This one is genuinely hard, and also the title is not clickbait. Alright, so the person who made it to Laugh Tale before Roger was actually Vanderdecken. Not this guy, the original Vanderdecken. I'll tell you why in a second, but first, let's go over his backstory. So in chapter 606, Brook explains to us what he knows about the famous Flying Dutchman, Vanderdecken's cursed vessel. Brook says, that ship doesn't belong in this world. It's hundreds of years old. One stormy night, a pirate captain suddenly went mad and threw his crew overboard. He drowned them all and cursed at the gods. His name was Captain Vanderdecken, and his ship was the Flying Dutchman. To punish him, the gods decreed that he should roam the seas for all eternity. And so in a previous post, I drew a comparison to this last dialogue bubble and Zunisha. Seemingly both were punished in order to roam the seas for all eternity. But that's not what I want to talk about today. I'll be dissecting more of these panels in future videos because I think that this song that was sung by Vanderdecken about the original Vanderdecken is probably really important. And we know now that in One Piece, music like the Drums of Liberation or Bing Sake are both really important things for the One Piece story. So walking back to what I wanted to talk about, on the surface, that backstory that Brook provided us about Vanderdecken can tell us at least that Vanderdecken predates Brook significantly, and we can confirm this even more by the fact that Vanderdecken the Ninth exists in our timeline, which means 8 generations back can put the original Vanderdecken, depending on lifespans, either in the Void Century or at a minimum about 400 years ago, a contemporary with Nolan possibly. But I'll be coming back to this part later, because we actually learn more about Vanderdecken through Vanderdecken the Ninth in chapter 625. So here are some interesting lines. Vanderdecken says the truth of the legend is a secret that belongs to my family alone, I think. The way he makes it sound, it's like Vanderdecken was a royal, to be honest. This is not too different than the wording that we see with the Nefertari, Kozuki, and in the royal Fishman family. But that point aside, Vanderdecken somehow knew about Poseidon's existence, and even the description of Poseidon. And that made me wonder, how did the original Vanderdecken know this? Because according to Neptune and Otahime, this knowledge was a royal legend. But here's the more interesting part. The current Vanderdecken tells us more details just before this. He says long ago, a mermaid princess had the uncanny ability to control Neptunians. That legend was what lured the first Vanderdecken down to the seafloor. Did you catch that? Lured. Okay, this part is huge for so many reasons. One, this implies that the original Vanderdecken was not from Fishman Island and might be someone from the Blue Sea. And even more so, he might not even be a fishman. And right there, you're probably like, whoa, wait, slow your roll here. But yeah, it's very possible that the original Vanderdecken could have been a human or any race and simply married a fishman, and thereafter the generations went on where their first child could be a hybrid, but then the rest could be more concentrated with fishman lineage until we get to the current Vanderdecken. But at the minimum, according to both Brook and our current Vanderdecken, we get the idea that the Vanderdecken was originally not from Fishman Island, as he was lured to the sea floor, which you wouldn't exactly say if you were native to this place. Now for the next part of this. Well, if he weren't from Fishman Island, but he had heard of the legend of Poseidon, and he is not a royal from the Fishman Island, there's only one option for him to know this. We know the answer as we have seen multiple adventurers travel across the world, and they all heard about the legends of Poseidon from only one place, and that place is the ancient city of Shandora or Jaya when Nolan found it, but was knocked up to Skypiea thereafter. After Roger acquired Odin, this was the first place they went to and learned about Poseidon, and what did they do? They went straight to Fishman Island after. Similarly, Robin told us that the poneglyph says the name of the ancient weapon Poseidon and its location, and both Roger and Robin confirmed that the poneglyph on Skypiea also stated the power that Poseidon held. So what does all of this mean? This means that the original Vanderdecken was here in Shandora on Jaya. We don't know exactly when, but I would assume it's around the time Noland was there. But that's not the crazy part. That means that the original Vanderdecken somehow read the poneglyph. Now there's a lot of options here, so let's do some process of elimination. He could have been from Ohara, but probably not, because it wouldn't make sense for Clover to exist relative to our timeline and for them to know the language already all the way back then. So he probably didn't learn it, and he's probably not from Ohara. That's an easy one to knock out. Then the next big option in our face would be, is there a world where he was a Kozuki? This one would be the craziest stretch ever, and Vanderdecken would be the most fodder Kozuki ever. But given that I said the original Vanderdecken could be human, this is a possibility. But I'd say that this last possibility is probably the most likely at the moment. That is kind of just the default best answer, and it's that the original Vanderdecken probably just had the voice of all things and could hear the poneglyphs just like Roger. Now, why is that important? Well, when we look at Roger's understanding of the poneglyphs prior to Odin, this is what he says. These are the poneglyphs that the world government has long forbidden anyone to read. You thought they were just cultural relics? Think again. They're the map that we need. The stories say that a vast treasure awaits on the final island, and the government says don't go there. That only makes the stories about the treasure more believable. If we can get there, we'll be the greatest pirate crew in the world, in both name and fact. That's right, and then and that's where it cuts off. So Roger prefaced his dream and mission of the poneglyphs saying that from the stories that he had gathered so far, there's a vast treasure. From our understanding, Roger made it to the last island, named it Laugh-Tale, but did not take any of the treasure and left it there, where at his execution, Roger claimed he had left his treasure in one piece, which is the entire point of the story. So now let's walk it back to our introduction to Vanderdecken's legend in chapter 606. This was the song that we heard. Dead men tell no tales. Dead men have no desires. In this blackened nation where not even a crow flies. Dead men's fingers have no need for jewels. The darkness hides even their regrets. Find it. Find it. The sunken treasure is mine for the taking. I'm the richest man in the world. Captain Vanderdecken. So I get really excited every time I read that last part. Did you hear what I heard? In a later video, I will decipher the first part of the song, but Vanderdecken sang a song about himself, where he claims he was trying to find a sunken treasure, and thereafter claimed he was the richest man in the world. And I don't think that this song is referring to our Vanderdecken, as it doesn't have the title of the Vanderdecken the Ninth, but also Vanderdecken, though did take treasure, wasn't ever really proclaiming himself as the richest man in the world. In the story later on, we find that he's mostly preoccupied with marrying Shirahoshi, not with riches necessarily. And I think that the treasure he is talking about is one and the same as the one Roger heard about. I think in junction to the fact that the only place the original Vanderdecken could have possibly heard about Poseidon was the Shandoran poneglyph, the rest of the song sounds like Vanderdecken didn't just look at one poneglyph. It might be the original Vanderdecken did not come across all of the poneglyphs, but he managed to acquire the road poneglyphs, or at least some of them, and he learned about what Laugh-Tale was and where it was. This part is more extrapolated, but I think Big Mom's road poneglyph might be the one that talks about a treasure, as Roger said he stole Big Mom's poneglyph, and while holding what seems to be a copy of her poneglyph, says that there was great treasure on Laugh-Tale, but by this point he had only seen one road poneglyph, and if only the road poneglyphs contain information about Laugh-Tale, then this is what currently makes the most sense, which would mean that we can strongly say that Vanderdecken visited the Shandoran poneglyph, and more gently suggest that he most likely saw the road poneglyph that Big Mom currently has. But alright, I think the most important thing in all of this is trying to figure out what Vanderdecken went through with the gods that Brook talked about. I have a shaky idea. Brook says Vanderdecken suddenly went mad and threw his crew overboard and drowned them all and cursed at the gods. With this, I don't think we have heard of anything similar to this in the story, but since we are talking about Shandora and Voice of All Things, this did kind of remind me of what happened to Pantori, who proclaimed to hear the voice of the gods. Once he got tree fever, he said to sacrifice sacrifice people to appease the gods. Maybe this is what Vanderdecken was going through, which would imply that Vanderdecken was originally Shandoran and had a similar relation to the gods. But we know Vanderdecken lived long enough to start an entire lineage down in Fishman Island, so I'm not sure if it were possible for him to contract the tree fever in the first place. But so in the last part, it says the gods decreed that he should roam the seas for all eternity, which sounds crazy because that means the gods were an entity that could enforce an actionable consequence of some sort. So that's when I was thinking, what if the gods he were referring to here were the celestial dragons instead? And the thing that made him go mad was the true history of the Void Century. Maybe somehow he made it to Laugh-Tale with incomplete information and came to a conclusion that drove him insane. Like when Rayleigh responded to Robin about the Void Century truth, he said everyone will come to their own conclusion. Roger arrived there and his entire crew laughed so hard they cried, but maybe Vanderdecken arrived and was completely blindsided by what he found there. The truth that he found there drove him insane and made him turn on his crew, and then forced him to confront the celestial dragons, and when he did, he was punished somehow, which then makes you kind of think that somehow Vanderdecken could have been a celestial dragon, as they would have probably killed someone dabbling in the poneglyphs, but instead they chose to forcibly exile him, it seems. And that goes back to the comment before about the way Vanderdecken spoke about his family. It felt like royalty almost. And we know that after this incident is when Vanderdecken went to the seafloor to seek Poseidon. It might have been to retaliate against the gods, or as a failsafe against the gods. Vanderdecken was probably not originally concerned with the ancient weapons, but when he found out about the Void Century is when he realized he needed the ancient weapons. So I want to clarify, the most stable part of this theory is that the original Vanderdecken probably had the voice of all things and visited the poneglyph in the City of Gold. I'll still be trying to piece together the possibilities that could come out of this tale that Brooke told us, but one thing that I did figure out, and this part has to be true, while I was making this whole script, I felt like I was missing something really obvious, and it stems from Vanderdecken's lineage or origin. It makes the most sense that the original Vanderdecken wasn't a fishman, and then it hit me like a freight truck. Really quickly, if you look at our Vanderdecken, isn't there something blatantly wrong about his appearance? And let me remind you, he is a Japanese bullhead shark fishman, sometimes called a cat shark, but is there anything weird yet? His arms, his shoulders, is he two people in one? Yeah, he's a little wonky for all of that, but that's not what I'm talking about. As a shark fishman, why does he have 4 legs? Even when we look at octopus and squid fishermen, they get multiple arms, not legs. Hyozo, who has multiple legs, but these are actually tentacles, but that's because he's a merman, whereas Vanderdecken is a fishman. So these 4 legs actually tell us what his lineage is, because I've been mentioning this to everyone in the past week on stream and in phone calls in relation to my future Zoro is a plant theory. Yes, you heard that correctly, just ignore that madness for right now, but plant people races are a real thing in One Piece. The only 4-legged race we know of was a race that was hidden in Mont d'Or's book, in Big Mom's collection of races, and that was the Kinoko Bito, which is a race of mushroom people. So because of Vanderdecken's current appearance, I think it is actually a safe assumption to make that the original Vanderdecken was this race, a mushroom person that crossbreeded with the fishman race. On top of that, he might have actually been the first person since the Void Century to dabble in poneglyphs and actually get to Laugh-Tale, if not extremely close to it. Which means Roger was almost beat out by a mushroom man. That wasn't clickbait, guys. So this was a fun theory to think about. I actually started thinking about this idea through a conversation with That One Piece Talk. Larry from That One Piece Talk is working on an incredible analytical theory that sparked this line of thinking and made me realize that Vanderdecken was reading poneglyphs. If you like this theory, please like, share, and subscribe. Whether the ending is right, I'm pretty sure Vanderdecken was a mushroom man who read poneglyphs. This is more of a filler theory amongst my more major theories, but sometimes I just get super excited about an idea and I have to share it. So hopefully you all thought this was interesting. There's so many ways this could become relevant later on, but it's also one of those things that might get lost in the story. But I also think that One Piece might end up wrapping a lot of these legendary plotlines that were created, especially since this plotline with the original Vanderdecken tied to the gods and Poseidon, both plot elements that will be heavily addressed in the final saga. Also, I want to announce that I will be streaming every Thursday during this break month at around 5 p.m. Eastern time to continue the tradition of streaming when the chapter drops. So look forward to that because I'm looking forward to seeing you all there. And so, like always, thank you for connecting with me, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you all on the next part Vision.